Iron applied waxes are the cornerstone of pretty much all modern waxing practice. When we apply a wax with heat to the heat opens the base, the molecular structure of the base expands, the molecules get excited, and the wax, being chemically similar enough, is able to sink in and occupy the same space. The wax is melted, so it's molten form, and in that fluid state, it allows it to flow easily into the base when the base is opened up. The penetration of wax into the base is a question of how deep the critical temperature goes. The base really needs to be fairly warm, up at around 100 degrees Celsius or so, in order to open enough to accept the wax into its structure. It can happen very much more slowly in a heat box over the matter of hours, but for the purpose of most ski waxing or tuning, we're using an iron or other infrared type heat applicator to open the base and get the wax to combine. When we wax the ski, we have to keep in mind that there's probably wax already in the ski unless it's brand new. And as we add wax, we're always creating a dilution in the ski of what was there previously with what we've just added. For that reason, when you're really changing wax jobs from cold to warm or from like a very hard, durable type product to a more natural paraffin for new snow conditions, you might want to put a couple of layers on to purify the signal, to get the wax that's in the base to be more pure and less of a weird dilution of different products. To apply wax is pretty simple. There are a couple different methodologies, and it depends on what form the wax is in. Prevalently, the wax is available in block form and in powder form. Block form is pretty easy, and there are two basic ways to use it. We take our iron, and you can either drip or crayon the wax. I'll illustrate the drip method first because it's quite fast once you get accustomed to it. Using the iron, I like to use this little plastic edge so that I don't run the hot metal right along the base. If you drip from way up high, you're going to end up with globs all over the place. We really want to drip a nice continuous bead along the ski. And so we get the wax melting, and we allow it to run off the base, and we run that plastic bit of the iron along the base like so, drawing a single continuous bead. And now we are ready to iron the wax. I like to move in a continuous pass from tip to tail. You don't need to hurry. It is possible to damage the ski by ironing wax, and it's important that you don't build up excess heat in the core of the ski. It's also important to set the iron temperature according to the wax manufacturer's recommended iron temperature setting. Waxes have a sometimes relatively narrow window between optimal fluid state and an excess energized state, which will damage the base when it goes in. If the wax is carrying too much heat energy, it vibrates really quickly, and when you damage the base that way, you'll scrape black wax shavings up. It's a good sign that you've probably got too much heat into the wax. This is a question of the carrying capacity of the wax, not the tolerance of the base for the heat. So having a good iron and setting your wax iron temperature to the manufacturer recommended temperature for the wax is really important. It doesn't take a lot of heat to get the wax into the ski. A couple passes, 2-3 passes maybe, are sufficient. The wax should flow evenly at the right temperature on a good base. And what I like to do is take that first pass, allow the ski to cool close to room temperature, and then take a second pass. For most applications, this is enough heat. If you're really concerned with durability, you might do a second application, again, to purify the signal in the ski or continue to harden the base with a really hard wax for super cold conditions, for example. The other really common way to apply block form wax is to crayon it onto the ski. And this is really popular because it's easy. It can be difficult. It takes a little skill to get that drip just perfect and get the right amount of wax on the ski. When we're crayoning, we use the iron to create a little molten film of wax, and then we just rub it right on the ski like this. It's fast, it's easy, and it distributes the wax quite evenly. Once the wax is crayoned on, we once again heat from tip to tail in a continuous pass. Try to avoid going back and forth with the iron because this can cause a buildup of excess heat in the core of the ski and in the base of the ski where the iron is turning around. So it's by far best to go from tip to tail in a single continuous pass. On classic skis, we run from the kick zone out to the ends of the ski, which means that at the front of the ski, we're moving backwards with the iron, and that's no problem at all. Again, allowing the ski to cool close to room temperature between passes of the iron ensures that you're not going to accumulate excess heat in the core of the ski. Trying to make the wax flow perfectly on the first pass is sometimes frustrating. You got to convince yourself not to care too much if some spots, like here along the edge, aren't perfectly covered in the first pass. You're always able to go back and make those better later on, but if we spend too much time working in one spot, we're going to overheat the ski. So we want to avoid doing that. Overheating the ski will cause the potential for deformation in the structural material of the ski. We want to avoid that. Different skis have different characteristic types of deformation, but none of them respond really well to elevated heat for really long periods of time. The amount of wax you use isn't totally critical. Most people use far too much. You shouldn't fill the groove. You shouldn't iron the groove. The groove is a control surface. It's not really a glide surface. It doesn't really perform better if you iron the wax in the groove, but it will mean that you have excess contact where the base or the edge of the groove hits the iron. I see a lot of damaged skis where excess heat is built up right close to the groove, and it's always because people are ironing the groove. The wax shouldn't be flowing off the sidewalls of the ski. You shouldn't have to chip it off the sidewall. Just about enough to cover the base is sufficient. In the event that you're doing it right, you're probably using about 2 to 3 grams of wax in block form wax per ski. The other super convenient way to apply iron on wax is in powder form. When the wax comes in powder form, it allows us to distribute the wax really evenly on the ski, and it also allows the company to put additional additive material that might not stay in suspension in molten form and get that additive material also evenly distributed along the ski. With powder, we can usually get the ski waxed well with about 1 gram of product per ski. And since in the end we're going to scrape and brush this stuff away, the less we use, the less we discard. As you can see, I tend to just sprinkle the wax all over the ski, including the groove, and then use my fingernail just to push the wax out of the groove, at which point I've got a nicely distributed pile of powder on the ski. Like I said, it totals about 1 gram, and utilizing the bevel of the iron, we can plow this wax out, spread it, and iron it on in a single continuous pass. It's pretty cool. Especially with harder paraffins, this is among the easiest and quickest ways to get wax onto the ski. The whole ski should cool close to room temperature before applying a second pass with the iron. If you want to, you can scrape the groove and pull that material back to the surface and allow it to be distributed along the surface. And then we'll take our next pass. A few pro tips when we're ironing. I tend to utilize the iron in this direction so that the long part of the iron is in contact with the wax when we're first spreading the wax on the ski. This gives us a high surface area when the wax has still got uneven volume and it hasn't been sufficiently spread, and it allows the wax to flow for a little longer time. On the second pass, I normally turn the iron this way, and the reason is that the camber of the ski, the shape, creates an arc, and the iron is flat. And if the arc is if the surface area of the iron is quite long, then because of the arch of the ski, the contact points are pretty far apart, and a big part of the iron isn't really very close to the base. So when we turn the iron this way, we get closer to the surface of the base, and it does a better job heating the wax at this level of the base and putting the wax into the base, I think. Third pass is fine, as long as the ski cools in between. You can do this as much as you want, allowing the ski to cool close to room temperature at every pass. Now that we've ironed the wax onto the ski, we've got to take it back off. This is a common misconception for beginning skiers. They think, why would you take off all the wax that you just put on? Well, bear in mind, we're putting wax into the base. And when we scrape and brush the wax away, we are going to leave behind a very, very thin surface film. You shouldn't see it. Basically, you should be looking at what looks like bare base. Trust me, that film is on there and it's going to perform really well. The thinner the film of wax that's left on a surface, the more hydrophobic it is and the less dirt accumulates with it. So reducing that film down to a very, very thin, shiny surface is really critical for performance. I like to start by scraping any paraffin out of the groove. Follow that using the scraper along the edge to scrape the edges. This is super fast and easy if you haven't dripped a ton of wax all over the edges. And then using a good sharp scraper at about a 45-degree angle, we scrape all the wax off the base. If you do a good job scraping and your scraper is sharp, you shouldn't have a lot of material left to brush. After scraping, we want to use brushes on the base in order to clear any remaining wax out of the structure pattern that is put on during the stone grinding process and to polish the surface. Brushing is a pretty simple process. You don't need to overcomplicate it. You should have a good metal brush for getting the structure clean and then a good nylon brush for polishing. I like to use my metal brush in one direction from tip to tail. Maybe a superstition, but it feels right. But when I'm polishing, I definitely scrub the ski. The nylon's not going to do anything to interrupt the directionality of the ski, and getting that scrubbing action tends to bring the polish up nicely. Some of the polishing I think is just cosmetic, but it sure feels better to put a shiny ski on the surface. Here we go, we're ready to ski.